Good morning guys, welcome back to another video. Guys, I just thought I'd do a quick bite-sized video today on a popular suburb in Western Australia as Armadale. Now Armadale, I'm sure we've all heard of in the news over the last few years, has done some substantial growth. And I just thought I'd quickly have a look at the data and see where Armadale is sitting early 2026, as I know that there are still some buyers agents propping up this area from the east coast. Armadale, as you can see here on Google Maps, covers a large area of land in Western Australia. Sits roughly about 30 k's away from Perth CBD, so not too bad there. And it does cover a large swath of land and some large well-known suburbs such as Armadale, Kelmscott, and borders on Southern River, Canning Vale and Gosnells. Now, if we look at the data, I wanted to look at something different, guys. I wanted to look at the data, and I've brought up the LGA of Armadale, which encompasses about 15 suburbs. And I just wanted to go through a couple of important data points that I look at as an investor, and something that we should all be looking at as investors to decide whether Armadale is still a place we should look at putting our investment capital. So we can see here on the left that we've got all the suburbs that make up the Armadale LGA. And then we start to dissect the data. Let me just scroll up a little bit. So if we see here on these first few columns, we look at the price increase over the 1, 3, 5 and 10 year mark. So we can see over 1 year they've all done over 10%, and as we start to cast our eyes down the columns, we see price growth in 3 years has been phenomenal, with some areas like Camillo doing 103%, Armadale itself doing 94%, Brookdale 99%. As we scroll down the column here, we can see all of these suburbs have done over 40%, 40% being the lowest in Forestdale. And if we look even further down the 5 and 10 year price growth mark, we can see, especially on the 5 years, we can see that all of these suburbs have done phenomenal growth. So look at Armadale has done 143% growth in 5 years. And as we cast our eyes further down the column, we can see 50, 80s, 90s and 100% growth in 5 years. And the 10 year average is not too dissimilar as well, with a lot of these suburbs averaging 10% plus growth over the last 10 years. As we continue to scroll through the data, guys, there are a couple of other things that I like to look at as an investor. We look at the rent growth over the last year has been minimal, has been 0% for a lot of these areas, but the 3, 5 and 10 year growth mark has seen some substantial rent increases, especially over the 3 to 5 year period, where we're looking at 40, 50% growth, and in the 5 year column we're looking at 90% growth for some of these areas. The ERSAT score for Armadale, guys, for those that are not familiar with Armadale in Western Australia, the LGA, it does have a bit of a rougher reputation, or it did. Some of these areas have a good ERSAT score, PR Waters being a 10, Harrisdale, Rollerstone being 9s. They're the more affluent suburbs in this LGA, whereas your Armadales, your Seville Groves, your Kelmscotts, they've got lower ERSAT scores, indicating that they're a bit of a rougher area or had a rough reputation back in the day. Now, a couple of the other metrics that I really want to draw your attention to, guys, is the renter to owner ratio. Now, some of these are less than ideal. So Armadale itself is sitting about a 40%, meaning there's 40% renters in this area and 60% owner occupiers. That's usually the largest I go in terms of a ratio. Some of these other areas, the more affluent ones, aren't too bad, with a very low rental stock, very low renter to owner occupiers, which is good, but that's also indicative of the ERSAT score and the price growth we've seen in those areas. Another key metric that we need to look at as investors is the affordability index, guys. The affordability index encompasses the affordability of the local demographic to buy in this area. Now, we usually go for about less than 35, 37 years, which is roughly the term of a home loan these days, being a 30-year home loan. Now, some of these areas, we look at Armadale itself, has got a 49-year affordability index. So that means for the local demographic, it would take them almost 50 years to pay off their home loan. And that in itself is a massive red flag for us as investors. And if we scroll our eyes down the column, we see a lot of these affordability indexes sitting in the 40s and 50s now, given the substantial price growth that's been had in this area. And that is a major concern for us, because if the local demographic can't afford a suburb, that means it's not going to grow, as owner occupiers aren't going to come in and prop up the area, purchasing homes in that local LGA. The stock on market long-term trends is still looking slightly healthy. The inventory is still healthy. Low supply on the market, less than 2 months for some of these areas. The hold period is not too bad, and days on market, guys, still, like I touched on earlier in the video, this area is still being propped up by buyers, agents and investors across the country. Some East Coast investors, I guess, still see value in an LJ like Armadale, with very low days on market sitting at 21 for Armadale. And if we cast our eyes down all in the low 20s and low 30s. Days on market, long-term trend and short-term trend still looking healthy. Stock is going real quickly. And a couple of other ones we like to touch on quickly before I go to the other slides. Population is healthy in Armadale. It is a large city of about 109,000 off the top of my head, and there are a couple of public housing pockets in some of these suburbs that we need to be wary of as investors. If we look at the Armadale economy itself, it is a large city. It does have a very diverse economy, guys. So if we just have a quick breakdown of the industries in this economy, we see that it's about just shy of 20% for healthcare, 15% education, retail, trade and construction make up the top four of the economy in the Armadale LGA, which is rather healthy and diverse. And I know that Armadale does have a large commercial part of it as well, where there's a fair few commercial buildings and infrastructure happening there. To finalise, to touch on, we look at the GRP of the Armadale LGA. It's just shy of just over 4 billion annually. Population of about 109,000, with a healthy local amount of jobs and employed residents in the LGA of Armadale. In terms of government infrastructure spending, guys, Armadale does have a hospital there, one of the major hospitals in Western Australia. It does also have a couple of other infrastructure government spend at the moment. We got the extension of the Metronet, Byford extension, that's about 1.3 billion rail project. And we've also got the Tonkin Highway extension happening in that area as well. So guys, my final thoughts on Armadale is this. Think of Armadale, or think of investing as climbing a mountain. Now, if a helicopter was to drop you towards the top of the mountain, you wouldn't experience the ascend up the mountain. Just like the way I look at it with Armadale, we have missed a lot of price growth over the last 5 years as investors going into this market. When you look at these columns where 3-year growth has done 100%, 5 years has done 100%, 100+% growth, you've missed on a lot of growth. As an investor, I want to be at the bottom of the mountain before I start my ascent. I don't want to be dropped off towards the peak by a helicopter and miss the whole experience. For me as an investor, I would not put my investment capital in Armadale now. I believe too much growth has already been had. I believe whilst there might still be a little bit of growth to be had, we've missed on the majority of that growth. 143% in 5 years growth we've missed out on. As an investor, I believe there are other markets around the Australian economy in different states, in different regional towns and different regional centres that we could start a lot earlier on in the cycle, and I believe Armadale is one to leave alone at the moment. Whilst it's still being propped up by buyers agents, I'm of the opinion that too much growth has been had. Until the next one, take care.